I'm going to give you a handful of questions that you can ask that will add up to pretty much everything that you need for entrepreneurial project management. So if you ask these questions, you're going to be a great entrepreneurial project manager. So project management for solopreneurs, for freelancers, for entrepreneurs, it's really not the same as for big companies with big teams and managing a lot of people and a lot of resources. You don't need Gantt charts, huge project management softwares or systems and all that stuff. And the reality is, in a more entrepreneurial space, especially if it's just one person working on the work, but even if you have a small team that's working with you, it's dynamic. It's quickly evolving. Your project plans are always kind of shifting and adapting, and oftentimes it's like new initiative after new initiative. And really, the goal, ultimately, you just want to take things across the finish line. You want to get things done. And so that's what we're going to talk about. I'm going to give you the questions to do that in today's episode. These are the proven direct response marketing, copywriting, and entrepreneurship success strategies you can use today to write your own ticket and create the life you want. I am Roy Furr, and this is Breakthrough Marketing Secrets. Now, here's today's breakthrough. So in my business career, in my copywriting and marketing since 2005, like I've worked for teams, I've worked for companies, I've worked with clients who have big teams and project managers and so on. And along the way, I've studied a ton of project management, time management, and productivity advice. And, frankly, there's a ton of good ideas. I have a whole stack of books and a whole collection of audiobooks that come at project management from all sorts of different angles. And what I found is that oftentimes when I try to implement these systems that are more complex, whether, almost no matter what they are, they often end up feeling like overkill for me as a more entrepreneurial person, when I was just a freelancer, when I've been functioning like as a solopreneur building a virtual business. But like the intention of project management is just as important. And frankly, like I'm diagnosed with ADHD. I have ADHD inattentive is my diagnosis. Now, I feel like where I was when I got that diagnosis and where I am today, very different through things like mindfulness practices, meditation, etc. But I still have part of me that just my attention goes really deep when it's focused, and it is ready to bounce off anything else when it is less focused. And so I recognize that as an entrepreneur, I'm like so many other entrepreneurs that just like, I get excited about one thing, then another thing, then another thing. But the reality is, if you don't get projects done, if you don't take them across the finish line, you're not going to get paid. And I've struggled with that as well in my business. And I'm talking, even client work as well as my own projects for my own business. And so, I was just thinking about this yet again, and like, what have I learned? And I was thinking about this in the context of working with an assistant on a number of projects. I was thinking, what have I learned that represents what has been the most effective entrepreneurial project management strategy? And one thing for me, it's just a matter of breaking things down into to-do lists, as far as like, this is what needs to get done. But when that's applied, like, you can do to-do lists and they can just be task focused and you can never get the bigger project done. Or you can have a project list, and then how do you get that project across the finish line? So I'm going to give you, for like a fairly simple project, like, you define an outcome, something that you want to be true in the world. You define the outcome, and then these simple questions can be enough to get you there. Now, we'll talk about bigger projects in a second, but the simple questions that you ask are, what does done look like, and is it done yet? What does done look like, and is it done yet? So define, like, you want something to be true in the world. You want an outcome. You want to put a work product out, whatever it is. What does done look like? What is it going? So it could be like, oh, I have a new training course that I'm putting out. I want that published. Oh, I have today's breakthrough marketing secrets that I need to put out. I need to have this, I need to have all of the resources in place for that to go out. I need, I want whatever thing to be true, right? I want whatever outcome to be true out in the world. What does done look like? And is it done yet? If the answer is yes, then great, you're done, right? But the reason that we're planning this project is that oftentimes the answer to that is no. And until the project is done, the answer to that will continue to be no. But we have to ask, what does done look like? And is it done yet? And then if the answer to that is no, assuming the answer to that is no, we say, what's the next step? Or if you're going to use the getting things done, David Allen terminology, what's the next physical action step? Is there a call I need to make? Is there something I need to research? Do I need to sit down and write something? Do I need to, record a video? What is the next step? And who's doing it? So as soon as the team is more than just one, you need to define, okay, this is the next step in the project. And this is this is the one person who is in charge of that getting done. Now, the reality is who's doing it could be the marketing team, or it could be, X team, but there still needs to be a point person. There needs to be the person who is the point of contact, who is the person who is in charge of getting that next step done. And so you ask, what does done look like? And is it done yet? Oh, okay, it's not done. Well, what's the next step? And who's doing it? Okay, this thing needs to happen, and Roy's in charge of it, so Roy needs to get it done. And then when that's done, and yes, you can take notes and you can have a few more next steps, and even you can have a bigger project plan, right? But still, you need to look at what's the next step that can happen, and if maybe a couple things can happen in parallel with more than one person working on them, that's great, right? But what's the next step, and who's doing it? And if it's ultimately one person responsible, that person needs to get the next thing done, and the next thing done, and the next thing done. So those are the simple questions. What does done look like, and is it done yet? What's the next step, and who's doing it? Right? That can be 4 questions. It can be 2 questions. I have it written as 2 questions here. Okay, so that's great for smaller projects, especially if you're just okay. And the other thing that's great for is more unknown projects. So right now, as I'm recording this, I'm actually on the cusp of launching Breakthrough Marketing Secrets as a podcast. And it started with, I want this to be a podcast. And there were a lot of unknowns. And so defined, what does done look like is that the podcast is launched and it's part of the daily publishing routine. Is it done yet? No. So what's the next step? And came up with a series of things that had to be done, and what those individual items are, and who's in charge of that. And so you define those things, and you have to lay that out. And as long as the total project plan is kind of a question mark with something like that, when you're venturing into new territory, you do have to always be going back to, is it done yet? What's the next step? Because oftentimes you're not discovering those next steps until you're halfway through the project. Okay, so let's get to bigger project planning. So let's assume that the project is something bigger. Well, there are a handful of questions. Actually, I have 3 listed here. There are 3 questions that represent the same thinking applied to bigger projects. So, question 1, what all needs to be done for this to be successful? So it could be that there's just a lot more that needs to be done. And you lay that out. And in terms of planning a bigger project, it can be helpful to sit down at the beginning and say, what all needs to be done? What are all the different items that need to be done? What are all the different things that need to be true? Oftentimes projects have multiple components that are critical to the success. Bigger projects do. And you have to define what all those different components are, what all those different action items are. What are the major milestones or sub-projects? This is the major, different thinking. As soon as a project gets big, it helps to say, for example, publishing new training, right? There's going to be There's going to be putting together the content, and that's going to have different steps. Maybe it's brainstorming and then assembling the content, and then maybe it's recording the content, and then maybe it's editing the content, and then maybe it's publishing the content, and then there's going to be promotion. And so there's going to be writing the sales letter or description or whatever, writing the marketing for it, and there's going to be actually publishing the marketing, as well as anything that needs to happen on the back end. So there's going to be some technical setup. Maybe if it's a funnel-based promotion, there's funnels that need to be put in place, etc. Right? So what are the major milestones or sub-projects? And a quick brainstorming session can usually kick those out for any project. And then within each of those, you're going to end up asking, like, what are the next steps? What are the, who are that? But who is responsible for each? So that's the third big question. What all needs to be done for this project to be successful? What are the major milestones or sub-projects, and who is responsible for each? And so a lot of times it could be like the tech team is responsible for the tech side, and the marketing team is responsible for the marketing side, and the content team is responsible for the content side, or however the responsibilities are split up depending on the company, etc. You're going to look at those projects, and then you are going to go back to those simple questions, right? You're going to go back to, okay, this milestone needs to be reached, or this sub-project needs to be completed. Well, what does done look like for that? And is it done yet? What's the next step, and who's doing it? So you go back to those within each of the sub-projects, or within each of reaching certain milestones in the project. But for the bigger project, you do have to think about what all needs to be done for this to be successful. What are the major milestones or sub-projects, and who is responsible for each? And take notes on it. And yeah, if you need project management software to delegate it between multiple members of the team, that's great. If you can use a to-do list, like I use Workflowy, and Workflowy is great. I can include a link with this episode to Workflowy. Workflowy is just a dynamic list tool where you can create basically infinite lists, nested lists. You can create, and there's more features that make it kind of more robust than that. But it's this powerful tool for creating lists in a computer, and you can use it, like I access it on my phone, etc. And then you could use a paper list. Like you can plan out projects on paper, plan out to-do lists on paper. That's also effective. The key thing is, like I recently experimented because my assistant works really well on Monday. So I experimented, well, what if I put some of my stuff in Monday and use that to manage my work? And I figured out like it creates resistance for me. It slows me down versus for me, Workflowy works really well, but then I can delegate to her in Monday, and Monday works really well for her. And so you have to figure out what the specific tools are for implementing this. But tools are freaking irrelevant. Tools are completely irrelevant if you don't have the right thinking and processes in place, if you don't know how to ask the right questions. And so you want to plan a project in an entrepreneurial way. Say, the simple questions are, what does done look like, and is it done yet? And what's the next step, and who's doing it? And the more complex project management planning that you can do is, what all needs to be done for this to be successful? What are the major milestones or sub-projects, and who's responsible for each? And if you put that level of thinking into it, then the tools that you use become an extension of the planning. But if you try to put the planning, if you try to implement the tool, the technology to make the planning happen, it really does not work that way. And so you have to figure out what planning tools work best for you to implement the thinking. Oh, what do you think? Leave a comment with this. Let me know on a scale of 1 to 10 how valuable you're finding this and why. What are your action items? What are your takeaways? How are you going to approach project planning and project management differently because of what you have just heard? Also, tap that like button before you go so you get more content like this delivered to you, and so the magical algorithms of the internet know to share it with more people like you who will find it valuable. Subscribe. If you're not yet subscribed here, you can do that. You can also go to breakthroughmarketingsecrets.com and get my daily emails Monday through Friday, including these daily episodes and more exclusive content for email subscribers. Certainly share, do everything you can to engage based on whatever platform you're engaging with this on. And hey, check out the link in the description. There's a link to Workflowy to sign up for free to just check it out. And number two, I'll include a link if you are really serious about growing your business through effective marketing and copywriting. I do have my BTMS Insiders training library. It's like Netflix for copywriting and marketing training. And I'll add entrepreneurial training because there is content there from me, from my coach, Joseph Rodriguez, on the type of thinking that goes into being an effective entrepreneur, marketing-centered entrepreneur, as well as just being more productive and doing better project planning, etc. And so there's a lot more content there. It's like Netflix for that training where you just pay a low monthly fee and you get instant streaming access to everything. So what do you think? I always aim for that 10 out of 10 value, and I hope that I've delivered it through this episode. My name is Roy Furr again this is your daily episode of Breakthrough Marketing Secrets, and I look forward to catching you again in the next episode. See you soon. Bye. Thank you once again for tuning in to this daily episode of Breakthrough Marketing Secrets. Remember, check out the links with this episode for even more value. Now make sure you like, comment, share, subscribe, and engage in every way you can to keep this show going and growing and delivering daily value to you. I'll catch you soon for your next big breakthrough.